Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking with us through that amazing finale to season one of Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. We have a great panel with a lot of the creative team behind this show, starting with the creator himself, Austin Winsberg.
Hello.
Um, we also have the executive producer, USC alumnus Paul Feig. And, oh, there he is. And we have three of the cast members, including star Jane Levy, Skylar Aston, and John Clarence Stewart. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so excited that we were able to actually screen an episode of the show as part of the lead into this panel discussion. And I feel like what we got to see here was really the culmination of all of the emotional weight that the performances have brought, put into one like really amazing 7-minute finale. And it's not something that would be obviously that impactful when you start off thinking that this is going to be a show with kind of an unusual idea as its central premise. So Austin, can you talk a little bit about how you thought about what this show was going to be and how the music was going to play into it?
Sure. So I had been working in kind of the musical space for a few years. I had a musical on Broadway in 2013. I did the live Sound of Music for NBC, and I had sold a few other musical pilots before the show. So I had always really loved doing musical type projects. And I always just felt like and feel like musicals and the best musicals can tap into really deep emotions and feelings that sometimes you can't just get from regular TV comedy or drama. And I had certainly seen certain musicals over the years where I've become an emotional wreck in the audience and just gotten floored by them. So I've always felt like there's a storytelling power and an emotional power that can come from musicals when you can no longer express what you're feeling in words, you have to express them in song. It's just always been like a heightened form of storytelling that I've always responded to. And I went to theater camp, same theater camp that Skylar went to. I was a theater major in college. So that's always kind of just been part of who I am. And when I came up with the idea for this, it really just started from the fact that my father passed away from PSP, that rare progressive neurological disease. At the same time, I was becoming a dad while losing my dad. And it was just a very tricky, dramatic, sad, tragic time in my family's life. And I knew that I wanted to write something at some point about that experience and what that was like. And I spent a few years trying to figure out how to crack that and what that should be. And how does it not feel too sad? And is there any way to make it feel emotionally something? And one day I just had this idea, well, what if the way that the dad sees the world while he's dying is through musical numbers? And suddenly the idea of everything that my dad was going through just felt a little less sad to me, a little bit more hopeful. And so it really just, it kind of, that was the genesis of the idea, was what if there's somebody going through this thing with their father, and their father is able to see the world through musical numbers. And then I met with an executive at NBC who was a friend of mine, and she said, feels a little small, is there a way to make it bigger? And then I came up with the idea, okay, well, what if it's the way that the guy is seeing the world? What if our lead character, someone gets this ability to see the world through musical numbers, and from this ability, he can now hear people's innermost thoughts and desires expressed through song. And then I pitched it to Paul Feig, and Paul said, I love it. I want to do it, but I think the lead should be a woman, not a man. And that changed a few dynamics, but honestly, it didn't change that much in the show. And it kind of went from there. So really, the genesis was not knowing what my dad was processing during that time, wanting to understand what was going on in my dad's head, and then coming up with this conceit, well, what if he could see musical numbers? And then what if the daughter could see musical numbers too, and what that would look like?
Well, Paul, tell us about having that note to transition to a female lead.
Well, I mean, I love this idea when Austin pitched it so much. I've been trying to figure out how to do a musical for years. We've been trying to develop one at my company forever. And it's always been just that question of like, how do you make the musical numbers feel organic to the story, where it's not just people bursting into song for no reason? Not that that can't be fun, but I just feel like a modern audience might need a little more explanation. And so when he pitched it, I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. I think, you know, I love that it was going to be in the computer world, and I feel like female representation in STEM has been so low, and I love the idea of like having a female coder who's really, you know, great at her job and successful, and it just all felt right, and I just felt like there was a lot of extra, you know, dimension we can get out of it that way, and anything that brings us to the great Jane Levy, I'm all for.
Yeah, Jane, tell us a little bit about your own interest in musicals and how that factored into wanting to be a part of this cast.
I don't come from a musical theater or television and movie background like most of our talented cast does. I was intrigued about, I was excited by the idea of making a musical and singing and dancing, and that's a big reason why I took this role, and I love it. It's so much fun. You know, watching it back, you know, I logged in about 20 minutes ago, so I saw the last number, and I just was thinking to myself how lucky I am to be a part of this show, and that's my job, and I'm still moved by that number even though I'm in it.
I mean, that's absolutely the power of music, but also the way in which this was brought to life cinematically. I mean, obviously it's on television, but it's an incredibly ambitious performance from everyone in the cast, as well as the cinematographer, the director, and bringing all of that together. So kudos. It was really amazing.
And then major shout out to Mandy Moore, our choreographer, who is the most inventive, amazing person. I mean, every time I'd see one of these numbers, you're just like, wait, how did they come up with this? And if you'll notice, for the film students in the audience, when you watch the show, almost all of the dance numbers are shot in one take, which just allows you to really see the dancing and appreciate it, and it puts it all on the performance, and I just think that's so brilliant. And obviously that last number was a 7-minute non-stop take.
Yeah, there's one cut which is just from outside to inside, and that's only because one was an exterior location and the other was an interior on our sets. But other than that, one cut.
Wow. How many times did you have to shoot it?
You know, we had done a fair amount of rehearsal, which we don't always get the benefit of the time to do that because of how quick we have to produce the episodes every week. So we came into it feeling pretty good and pretty prepared, and we felt really good after take 6. And then we decided to just do it one more time just to be safe. So we only did 7 takes, but take 6 was the one that made it into the show.
John, tell us a little bit about what attracted you to doing a musical television show.
Actually, what attracted me initially was Jane. We worked on a show previously, and we were all out hanging out, having drinks one day, and she talked about this show that she was doing. And one of our castmates told her that I sang, because I don't lead with that information. And she said, "You sang?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." And then she wrote something in her phone. And lo and behold, a few days later, I'm in the room. And the thing that struck me was the grief aspect of it. I lost my father 14 years ago now. And it was just the device of the show, the beginning of Simon's arc, gave me an opportunity to dig into a place that I haven't been able to do creatively. And then when we did the test and I had a chance to talk to Austin, I mean, we spoke for a while before I went into the room, and I felt like I was in good hands, you know? So those were the things that brought me to the table.
Skylar, I don't know if we're losing your video here, but...
Are you? Am I not on?
No, you're there. I see it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I do.
Oh, maybe it's just me.
That's Skylar vision.
Well, Skylar, tell us, I mean, we obviously know a little bit more about your musical background. So give us a sense of what it was like to find that sort of creative outlet, but in a TV version.
Yeah, well, I first found out about the project from my agents. They called me and they were like, "So we have something for you, and we think you're really gonna like it." And I was really pumped because like they wouldn't say that if it was a musical like an ordinary musical. And because they know that like if I was going to try to do something in this space, kind of like that made me excited at first. And then on page 2, the banter with Max and Zoe, I was just hooked. I was like, I knew who they were, and I just saw their comfort and their kind of history. And then I met with Austin and wanted to just like make sure that he was kind of in the fabric of the show the way that I was hoping. And after, you know, of course, reading the script and crying from the beautiful True Colors scene, I was totally hooked. And also the Stage Door Manor Performing Arts Camp connection with Austin. That's family stuff.
Nice.
The season has so many beautiful arcs dealing with, of course, all of the grief and family and love. I'm curious if you can all discuss a little bit about how you thought through the sort of way in which all these tones would come together, because sometimes it's very funny. Sometimes you're just really in it for a great musical number, and then sometimes you're crying, and that's a lot to pull off, especially within one episode of a TV series, let alone all the time for an entire season.
Yes, you've just hit on the number one challenge in the show. And the number one thing that I obsess about endlessly, and why I get almost no sleep while we're working on the show, because the tone is everything. And the tone is always, I mean, in every project, everybody could speak to this, but like the tone is the most important thing in a show. And this show runs the gamut of tones between comedy and drama and musical. And being able to get everybody on that same tonal page. And that starts in the writer's room, and then that goes through production design, and it goes through the songs we pick, it goes to the directors we choose, it goes through the acting, it goes through the editing. Every piece of it is like, I think we're walking a tightrope with the show every single week. And I think that there is always the possibility that that hopefully at its best, we could hit on something really emotional or special or funny, but like 2 degrees this way or 2 degrees that way, and it could be really cheesy or saccharine or syrupy or not funny or bad. And so it's just a really high bar that we've set. And it's a bar that I'm obsessed with trying to maintain at all times. And I just always feel like art at its best touches upon all of those emotions, that art can be comedy, and not that I'm trying to call our show art, but like that humans are dramatic and emotional and funny and artistic and messy, and just wanting to live in that authentic space. And that starts with the family story, because every single thing that happened in that family's life in season 1 happened in my family in the last 6 months that my dad was alive. To a story, every one of those stories happened with my family. And just trying to be authentic and true to my memory of what that experience was. And then drawing from Jane and John and Skylar and all of our actors, talking to them about who they are and what their essence is, and just trying to lean into what I think they're about, and then trying to capture it in every way, on the page, on the day, everywhere. But it's an endless challenge with the show, but also something that I think when we get it right makes the show feel unique and distinct.
Austin, our show is art.
Thank you, Jane.
You're here.
I just didn't want to say that out loud. It sounds like there's a
You
danger
can't say
that
it.
it could sound. I don't want to be the one to call it that.
There you go.
I'm sure the 400 people watching this right now would agree with you too.
Thank you, 400 people.
But like, you know, like Austin says, I mean, tone is the most difficult thing to pull off in entertainment, and it's why you tend to see things very compartmentalized. This is a drama, this is a comedy, this is a musical. And you know, you really have to be, when you have the creators and the writers and everybody pulling this off, there has to be a real amount of bravery going on, because you can fall on your face so easily and get it wrong so easily. You know, and that's why I really love how much comedy there is in this show, because it'd be very easy to make this not a comedy. It'd be very easy to just kind of go more dramatic with this and have these numbers show up. But then, you know, look, people love that kind of thing, but I think my favorite thing in the world is when you're crying and you're laughing and you're feeling this, and when it's all happening, because that's what life is. And I think a lot of times dramas, you know, get off easy because they just kind of avoid that tone, but that's why it never resonates as real to me as something that is funny 1 minute and not, because, you know, that's the sine wave that is life. And it's just really up to the filmmakers and the creators to navigate that so narrowly, and to take the chance, and for the actors to just walk that absolute tightrope. And, you know, and I mean, kudos to our cast for doing that, because you are really taking a chance every time you step out on that tightrope. And what's great about somebody like Austin and everybody who's working on the show is they allow you to dance on that tightrope. And sometimes when you dance, you go too far one way, too far the other way. But that's how then when we get in the editing room, we can find it. But they nail it so much every time that it's really seamless. I mean, when I would watch dailies, I just always be like, oh my God, it would just blow me away. So kudos to every one of these squares.
I'm interested in learning more about how you sort of worked with the actors to draw out things from their own experience, particularly, and I'm really sorry that Alex isn't here with us tonight, because the episode where you explore that sort of intersection of gender identity and faith identity is really amazing. And I think I was reading in the press notes that comes from a very personal place in Alex's life as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like when we decided to cast Alex in the part, and that part was originally written for a woman, and I saw like 300 women for the part, and it just didn't feel, it felt kind of expected. And then he came in, and suddenly there was this brand new energy, and it felt like it just opened up a whole new world of possibilities of storytelling in the show. And I was just really excited about him and Jane together, and this kind of unique, special, odd couple in San Francisco that felt kind of real and true to me. And I just wanted to make sure that everything I was doing with the character was also true to who Alex is, and trying to be true to his experience. And Alex seems so confident, and Mo seems so confident on the outside. So trying to kind of chip away at those layers and understand what's really going on the inside. And so I had multiple conversations with Alex early on in the process, as I try to do with all the actors. And I just said to him, you know, like, what are some of your vulnerabilities, or what are some things that you've gone through in your life that have really stuck with you and resonated with you? And he started talking about his experience with church, and his experience with faith, and his experience of still believing in faith, but also being a part of certain congregations and certain churches where he felt not welcome. And what is it that the place that you go to for comfort is also the place that maybe you don't feel comfortable? And I don't want to speak to his whole experience of that, but that entire episode was completely based on what he had gone through.
Wow. Are there other things for the rest of you that you developed alongside Austin and Paul and the writers to explore your character in a way that was personal?
We're working more on that for season 2. Actually, we've been talking about that further, but I think like certain Max's integrity for me personally was something that we talked about towards like episodes 8, 9, and 10, when he's kind of off on floor 6 doing his own thing. I think Austin and I had a bunch of conversations about that, and related to kind of where I was at with my own confidence and integrity. But we have actually just been talking about season 2 about going deeper and making it more personal to me and Max, which I'm very excited about.
Today, I mean, the thing about Skylar, just really quickly, it's like, we went to the same theater camp. We speak a lot of the same language. A lot of characters that I've written over the years are very Skylar-esque. So it's kind of like, I always try to write one character that kind of feels like a version of me in some ways. And so I'd like to think that Skylar's kind of the extension of me, but the better version of that. And then we've tried to find like different layers that make it more Skylar too. So it's not just neurotic-y, Jewy Austin. But certainly, John can speak to some of that, what our process together.
Yeah, we spoke specifically about like my relationship with my father and grief, as far as that was concerned. And I'm not sure if we spoke about this specifically, or if it was kismet, but the relationship between myself and Jessica mirrored a relationship that I've had in my life with an ex-fiance of mine. The way that we can be in these spaces of being so close to people and yet so unknown, based on what we've gone through, and then what it feels like to be known by someone so quickly because we shared experience. I liken it to when you lose someone and when there's grief, it's like living on the moon, and you can talk about it, you can reference it, but if you haven't been there, you don't know what it is. And that experience between Jessica and seeing that play out between myself and Zoe, Jane, beautifully, that was part of my life, which was great.
That's actually new information to me. I did not know that, but I did know, I mean, John and I talked a lot just about our mutual grief and our father grief, and the picture of his father, I hope you don't mind me saying this, in the pilot is actually John's father. And just, John is very soulful, and John is very emotionally deep and complex. And so I try to, the more I understand John, the more I try to lean into those sides of him that I think are really beautiful and really profound. And
Yeah.
so that's just, and maybe that just comes with working with really great, gifted actors that bring so much to the table, like Jane too. It's like, I just feel like I understand these people now really well, and it just all informs what goes on in the writing. And Jane and I, every episode before she would shoot, we'd sit down for a couple hours and have like a Jane Austen tone meeting where we would just talk about what her character is going through scene by scene and what is her arc of the episode. And Jane is really great at calling me on scenes and moments where it's like, I don't understand what's happening with Zoe here. Or like, oh, what's going on in her head in this moment? I'm like, you're right, that is not clear. Let's make that better. What could that be? And so I just view everybody as a partner in the process, and because I trust everybody, and I feel like we're all, this is a very, as personal as it is, it's also all, I feel like it's all of ours together. So it means it's collaborative, and that doesn't always work that way. And when you work with certain actors who have the wrong goals and the wrong thing, but everybody's working towards the same goal with this project. And so I just feel like I would be an idiot to not extract from their own lives or who they are as actors or what they bring to the table.
But if I can jump in to say in Austin's praise, what an unusual thing that is, because especially when we get into showrunners or creators or just even like writer directors, it tends to be very like, I worked 3 years on this script and you're going to say each one of these words, and it's not a collaboration. What happens in those situations is you get all these talented people and you're not getting anything from them. You're just literally getting the little bit that you saw that you need, and you're not pulling from this enormous wealth of experience and talent and creativity. And when you have the confidence to open it up to them and take their notes and hear things, that's a huge thing. And that's what makes a show like this so great, is that everybody's vetting it and everybody is putting their personal stamp on it. Because, look, as writers and directors and all that, we can sit there and come up with a million lines and go, they would do this, they would do that. What so many people behind the camera don't understand is that these actors have to be these people. They have to expose their psyches. They have to expose every vulnerability to the camera. And if they're doing something that isn't true to them and they're just trying to say somebody else's words, it makes them look bad, and it's just not an honest performance. So I mean, it's really the only smart way to do things. And any aspiring writer directors out there in the film school, listen to your actors. I know I went through film school, and there was always some little contingent that was very prejudiced against actors. They loved the stories about Hitchcock, like not telling people their motivation and stuff like that. And I was like, all you have are your actors. If you don't have your actors and they don't feel comfortable and they're not putting in and contributing and making this real to them, you're not going to have a good project. You're going to have something that looks really great, but nobody's going to engage in it because it's not going to feel real.
I'm curious how that collaboration may extend into the selection of the songs, because you guys like spared no expense. It's just like the catalog of music available has really been mined, and some of the greatest songs ever written are in this show. But there's, first of all, got to be some level of responsibility or weight on the actor to perform this song that we know from so many years of another singer performing it. So what is that process like, to have to interpret something that is so famous but put it in your own words? And then also, the fact that we're listening to songs that we all know, like what drives the selection?
Well, do you guys want to talk about what it's like to perform the songs first?
No, you go. I want to hear what it's like for you first.
Well, I mean,
I can tell you one thing before you say that it's very expensive. So next year it's going to be Zoe's public domain playlist.
It's all for "He's a Jolly Good Fella," just over and over again. Some of it is first of all, the songs have to do one of three things, and this is sort of based a little bit in musical theater for me. They either have to advance plot, reveal something about character, or be funny, or some combination of the three. And that's my first criteria for the songs. And do I see it in a number? And then how do Mandy and I figure out a way to kind of make that come alive as a number? Because it's never just somebody singing. There's always an intent behind it. There's always another considered idea behind the number. So that's part of it. A lot of times it's a little bit of chicken and egg. Sometimes like we'll start to map out the big board and I'll say, oh, you know, it'd be fun. Like in that scene where Simon's at Zoe's apartment, he's got to sing Should I Stay or Should I Go? And we know really early on in the process that Should I Stay or Should I Go is going to be in episode 5 somewhere. We just know that, and that's on the board. But more often than not, we'll get to a thing. We just finished breaking episode 1 with the 5 songs in episode 1 and it's of season 2, and it's like I know at this moment we need a song that's about jealousy, and then it's like, okay, well, what are some songs about jealousy that could work here? And then we literally go through our Apple Music or whatever on our phones and like pick out songs that have to do with jealousy, and we play them in the writer's room and we dance around and we say, does it work lyrically? Does it feel good? Does it feel good on? Does the song Jealous feel good on John's voice? And so that's like process 1 is just like, what are the songs that check all those boxes? And then the other criteria for me usually, and this is where people get a little annoyed with me, is that it has to be a song that I know for the most part. And there's a little bit of a generational gap, a tiny bit between some of the songs that the younger people think are cool and they want, and songs that like I know the network won't know if I don't know them. And so that's a little bit of a dance, but just also trying to make sure that it's music that feels popular, that it feels like it's been in the zeitgeist in some way, that it covers all these different eras and genres. And then it's a whole process with me going through with our music producer and our music supervisor. First, can we get that song? How do we get the rights to the song? Then what do we want to do to the songs to make them our own? And then sometimes in the process, I will check in with various actors and be like, you cool with this song? Or do you think there's a better one here? And that's where I do lean on people like my boy Skylar to say, is this song work for you? And because, you know, they also know their vocal abilities better than I do and what songs will work for them.
Did any of you request a change based on something that you thought would be much better for your character?
I'd be lying if I said I didn't one time. But we're very happy with where we landed. I mean, I personally like to err on the side of, I think it's also cheaper too to have all that awareness of what is very top 40 when everybody knows, but then we can afford to introduce some new artists and even some different tracks from artists that we know, like if there's a Bruno Mars song or a Maroon 5 song or a Amy Winehouse song that you're like, I think I know that, and like 60% of the people that watch our show will know. I think it's a pretty decent. I think that's kind of a passing score for me there. But but I think you know, I like love stepping up to the plate for anything they choose. They gave me an opera song this season, which we didn't even talk about. Like that, didn't you just tell me? Or like, I didn't know if it was a joke or not, but I was so excited to do Conte Partito, or as Austin likes to call it, Contre Perero. Or it like changes every time, right? Wait, what is the name that I sang in episode 4? Wait, what's the Italian aria that I sang in episode 4 that's on Olive Garden commercials again?
Contra Perero. Yeah. I mean, look, everyone's great at like doing. There's also like the songs have to. Sometimes it's a very thin needle we're trying to thread with the songs too. It has to be a song that like if it's a song that advances plot or reveals something about the character. Like sometimes I thought initially with the show, the songs didn't have to all work lyrically because it was more about the emotion that Zoe was getting from the songs. Mm-hmm. As we went along more and more, I kind of started to realize, well, it still has to sort of match up lyrically. So some songs are certain examples of things where we need something very specific. There's only 1 or 2 songs that will work that we find. And then it's like, we cross our fingers that we can get that song. And everyone's all game though. Everyone's willing to play and try different things out. And, you know, I to Skylar's point, I mean, I want to also expand the musical range in season 2. I think definitely one of the mandates in season 1 was make sure that it's like strictly hits in a way. So being able to expand out of that a little bit and a little bit out of my comfort zone, I think will probably be a good thing and will make Skylar happy.
I also know, I truly think that the thing that's exactly what Austin said is like the thing that makes the most narrative sense wins. And like, so if there is a song that like that everybody doesn't all know 100,000%, we can afford 1 or 2 of those an episode because thankfully we do so many musical numbers on this show. That is a blessing in and of itself. So if you have a Rolling Stones song or something, I think that you can do Khalid, which people know who Khalid is.
True.
I know who Khalid is, so I'm game for that.
Well, I want to drop into the mix just because you all do so much work on the front end, right? As the actor interpreting. One of the things that I found with some of the songs that you all chose for me was that if I took the music away and just looked at the lyrics, there's a story in it, right? So, and for me as the actor interpreting it, it's very helpful to be able to look at the scene once I get the scene and everything like that. And
No.
looking at where everything's going and what I'm doing, and that overlays with what Mandy is doing, so that when I go into the space with Mandy and we're working on it, there's that sense of collaboration with what Austin is talking about. So they all kind of overlay on top of each other, and it helps because there's so much forethought.
Because the songs are never just songs for song's sake. There always is a purpose to the song, and the purpose is always something that informs Zoe's character or informs something in the story that moves it forward. Or especially in the episode, I'd love for, not to take over, but I'd love for Jane to talk about episode 8, where it was all her singing every song, because that was a whole process that we went through too.
Yeah, the one time I suggested a song was a very bad suggestion. I was like, instead of I Want You to Want Me, what's the song, When I Think About You, I Touch Myself?
We had entertained it too. We had talked about that song.
You were like, let's think about it. And then I like said it to Mandy, and she was like, I think you both were like, that's a bad idea.
It was a bold choice.
Anyways, I'm glad we did I Want You to Want Me. But I think because I don't come from a singing background, I, of course, stressed out about sounding good and wanting people to think that I was a good singer, but I mostly approached it just as I do my acting, which is what's happening to this character, and now I'm using my voice as a form of expression. Now I'm using this gesture that Mandy choreographed. So for me, I didn't think really about the musical artists or like how to. Eventually, for me, it was just like, this is another form of storytelling, and I'm gonna think about Zoe's journey and what's happening in this moment. And this song is a joke. I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus some songs are just jokes. And then this song, How Do I Live Without You, is an expression of like my deepest fear. So I just tried to open my mouth and let what was happening with Zoe flow through my singing.
That's like a testament to your instincts, Jane, because like what John was saying, like about breaking a song down in monologue form, that's stuff you get taught in like classes for this. And then like you learn then through doing a musical once or twice, like how to properly lip sync to the track that you created for yourself, and when to pick to do it live like you did. All of your instincts on how to perform this is an art in and of itself that just came very naturally and as an extension of your talent. And that is, but John said like what drew him to the project. You were the only person cast when I was hired. And when I read the pilot, the only thing that I would say is, all right, who's playing Zoe? Because she's literally all over the pilot. So if she's not delicious and likable and we want to live through her, that's the show, and it hinges on you. And then you to then step up to another challenge and say, after the pilot, hey, I'd like to sing in this series, and then do episode 8 is just insane. We all we can't take that lightly.
And if anybody wants to see a master class in comedy and how to funnel all these things through one that I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus is so masterful and so hilarious. It's up on I put it up on my Twitter feed, and it's out there. You got to watch it because it's just you, but watching you fight your body to not do this. Was prancing, was that you or was that written?
It was me.
That's so funny. She just like comes bopping back in, and she under her breath goes like, prancing. Like she can't believe it's happening.
Yeah, I'm prancing right now.
Thank you.
I just want to say 2 last things about that, and then I will stop with number 1, which is they all like part of what's so great about these people. And I know it's like every cast is great, but like for real, like they come to play and they're not afraid. And like John doing Mad World in episode 10, like where he just so commits and so throws himself into the body movement, or Happier in episode 9, where it's like, we didn't even know that John was really a dancer when we cast him. We hoped that he could do it somewhat, but like
John didn't
The
know.
bar just keeps getting raised. And Skylar, it's like I throw everything at Skylar, and Jane, I throw so many things at them, and they all come to play every time, and they never say no. And that's really amazing, and just puts more pressure on me to come up with more cool things for them to do.
And shout out to John. John, in the pilot, we didn't get to use it because I think there was some other issues with it, but you do the most beautiful dance number when you're singing Mad World that I think I've ever, I mean, the first time I saw that in the dailies, I just started crying. It was just so gorgeous. So
Thank you, Bob.
we put that out on the extra,
Yeah, can we put that out?
Why we did it in episode 10, because it was like, it was so great in the pilot. We're like, we got to put it in.
Yeah, so great.
I appreciate that.
I wanted to ask about the song with Howie's daughter, performed without spoken lyrics. Really a beautiful and I think quite groundbreaking moment of television, where you have an all-deaf performance. You do have some music so that we know what the song is, but you don't subtitle it, and you have them all perform it in sign language. Can you talk about the development of that, where that idea came from? And
yeah, I'm always trying to figure out ways in the room for Zoe's powers to be extraordinary. Never should have titled it that. Just puts extra pressure on. And so, just different ways to play with the conceit. And like in episode 7, Zoe thinks that Max is singing to her, but it's really a flash mob. In episode 8, Zoe's the one who has the power, who gets the glitch, and now she's the one singing all the songs. In episode 9, someone just came up in the room one day, came up with the idea, what if she hears a deaf person song? And I instantly thought back to seeing 3 Deaf West shows in Los Angeles. Deaf West is a theater company in LA that the majority of the actors are deaf or can't hear. And so I saw a production that they did of Big River. I saw a production they did of Pippin, and I saw this amazing production they did of Spring Awakening that actually ended up going to Broadway. And every time I would go and see those productions, I would always be incredibly moved and blown away by the talent of these performers. And they kind of do this whole kind of choreographed dance where they sign all the songs and dance, and there's usually speaking performers behind them singing or saying it while they're emoting it. And the way that they're all in rhythm with each other and the way they all move around each other, I always just found deeply impressive and moving. I was like, if we could do a number like that Deaf West number, like a Deaf West number, that would be incredible. And then it was like, well, it can't just be one deaf person signing. It's got to be a whole group of people. And then we just came up with this idea of what if it's Howie's daughter, and what if they're fighting and this group of deaf performers sings fight song. And because it's their fight song, it is their internal thing that they are expressing to Howie, to Zoe, about how he's fighting with her because she wants to go to Kenya, and he feels like she's not able to do that because she's hearing impaired, and he's afraid of what that means for her, and he's trying to be overprotective of his daughter. And it's her and her friends taking a stand saying, we can do this, we can do anything anybody else can do. So once that conceit was in place, I felt very strongly from minute 1, no hearing people in the number. It all has to be actual deaf people performing. No people singing in the background who can hear, and no subtitles, because they have an inability to hear what we're doing at times. Like they have a handicap that doesn't allow them to hear our voices. So maybe there should be something that's a barrier to entry for us with that song. And I just felt from minute 1, and I had a lot of people fight me along the way. Can there be subtitles? Can there be this? Can there be dot? And I just saw it very clearly from minute 1. The second that I told it to Mandy, and she's like, can we do that? I'm like, let's do it. And she jumped in head first. And it was the hardest number Mandy had to do all season, because working with deaf performers, it's just that we needed an interpreter there the whole time. She's used to calling stuff out. They can't hear you, so they have to be eyes focused on you. Sign language itself became part of the dance. She had to learn sign language for it, but it was really important to us to get it right. And we brought in David Kurz, who is the artistic director of the Deaf West Theater, to work with us on it. He helped us find performers all around the states that we flew up to Canada, and it was a really powerful day on set too when we shot it. But it was just important to be, again, like everything else, to authentic to them and their experience, and to be strong about it and proud of who they are, and not try to gloss over it by hearing people singing or subtitles, for me.
Well, I know we have a ton of questions coming in from the audience, so I just want to ask a couple of other things before I switch it over. And let me say right now to the people that are watching, we have a bit of an unusual thing that we do where we invite you over to ask your question live. And if your camera ready, you can turn on your video. So when we get to that portion, I'll call out your name, and I'll switch you over to the panelist side. And you're welcome to turn on your video, but at the very least, turn on your microphone so that you can ask your question. So first of all, congratulations on getting the second season. I'm very curious to know the sorts of things you want to explore, especially since the Zoe's dad's story has come to, an immediate end, at least in terms of, he's passed away. What sorts of things do you want to bring in to sort of fill in the emotional weight that had driven so much of the season with his story?
Well, I think that with grief, you learn that it doesn't just go away. And so I was initially concerned about, are we going to have emotional weight in season 2? And we've already had 3 or 4 moments in episode 1 that make me cry talking about them. So I feel like we're not at a loss for emotional moments. I think season 2 is really about Zoe's journey of recovery and what that looks like. And for all of our characters who've been impacted by this, and this is a little bit of the sort of the quarantine parallel narrative that I'm trying to tell a bit in this, is like, after a tragedy, after you go through something that's so emotionally impactful, how do we recover? And then not only how do we recover, but what does it force you to look at inside yourself and kind of address, and what kind of person do you want to be moving forward, and how do you redefine yourself? And if you sort of start to view the world as life being precious, and what lessons can you take away from the meaninglessness of that situation to try to inform your own life? So every character in season 2 is kind of going through their own search for meaning, and their own search for trying to define who they are in this world after tragedy. And within that, there is still a lot of depth and emotion and messiness amongst all the characters, but especially for Zoe as she goes through 5 or 6 different phases of that Jane and I have talked about already.
Do you each have a favorite number that you performed? Is there or a particularly challenging one that you're really proud of?
I really, really liked the thing that we did in the finale, Jane, at your apartment. It was really cool, and it felt, I've said this before, but it felt like a one-act play in a way, because it just starts with like, hey, we're gonna just pick out a movie, and then it's like sexy, and then it's romantic, and then it's like sweet, and then it's bedroom farce, and then it's drama, and then it's like romance, and then it's like serious drama. It was like, it was really just a pleasure to perform with Jane too. And again, if I could toot Jane's horn again, made me realize how flawless she'd be in the theater space as well.
Thanks. Big thanks.
Skylar. It feels hard to answer this question. It feels like you're asking me to pick a child. And I always end up feeling like I don't like my answer. However, what comes to mind right now is Pressure was really, we shot it for a whole day. Normally, like Paul said, our musical numbers are done in one take. Sometimes we do multiple musical numbers in one day. Pressure, we got to shoot for the entire day. So we shot it like a film would shoot a musical number. So I did that a lot of times. And it was the most choreography heavy. And having Skylar jump in at the end and do what's it called when you sing live? Sing live.
Acapella is what that's called?
Yeah, I was singing live and running back and forth, and Skylar, on purpose, Mandy didn't invite him to our rehearsals because in the story, Max is trying to cover up for Zoe and has no idea what's happening. And so Mandy thought maybe that would be great for Skylar not to know what was actually happening. And I also could tell the crew thought it was really funny. So whenever the crew thinks something's funny, I feel really proud of myself. Yeah, and then also scenes with Peter. I think that The Last Dance was particularly moving. When we shot it, there wasn't the score of True Colors. It's just completely silent. And I thought that was a really great idea to have the final song not be a song. And that was really emotional and such a sad send-off. Working with Peter was such a moving experience for me.
And to finish this part of the talk, I'm gonna say Happier. Happier was the number that, out of all of them, it was the first foray into a lot more dancey kind of movement, more contemporary kind of dance. It was very ambitious in a lot of ways. When Austin was like, we're gonna do this, I looked at him like, we're gonna do what? And it was, and Jessica, played by India, the way that we were able to dance and move together and tell story together was really profound to me. The rehearsal process, there was this moment, and I didn't drop her one time. I didn't drop her once. When she had to fall, she fell down and I had to catch her with the back of my hand. And it felt, I mean, it was so ambitious, and to come out on the other side of it and to see how it turned out was so rewarding. Yeah.
That was so good, man. Oh God, that was so good. Blew me away. Yeah.
Appreciate it, bro.
All right, so I want to call on some of the students and alumni, and we'll go ahead and start with one of our alumni, Ashley Hillis. So, Ashley, I'm going to move you over. And feel free to turn on your video if you can.
Hi. I am most definitely not camera ready because you guys made me cry with the finale. So thank you. And also sorry for the puffy eyes. I was just wondering about your pitching process. I guess this question is for Austin. How did you go out and pitch this? Did you have a show Bible you put together? Had you written a pilot? Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I just had I had a pitch for the series, but really for the pilot mostly. I mean, I've sold a lot of pilots, so I kind of have like a pitch formula that I kind of do, and I always start with something personal. This was easy to start with the personal because it was so personal. So, you know, I start with the personal, then I kind of talk about the big idea behind the show. Then I talk about who all the characters are and I describe them. And then with each of these characters, I would describe the kinds of songs that they would sing as part of the pitch. And then I walked everybody through the pilot story. And then I think I probably walked through a few potential episodes, but kind of the little bit of the arcs. But I had the benefit, at the time, we have these great producing partners, Eric and Kim Tannenbaum. They were involved in the show. But by the time we went out with it, we had the Tannenbaums involved, Universal Music Group, which let everybody know in the pitch that they would help us get the songs. So it kind of alleviated any concerns or worries about song rights. Paul and his team. So we came, and Lionsgate, our studio. So we came into the pitches with a whole team already, and kind of just this 20-minute pitch presentation from me talking to everybody about what the show is.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, like when you're pitching TV, I mean, Paul can speak to this too, so can Skylar. But like a lot of times if you're pitching television, usually at the network level, but I think this could exist with streaming too. Oftentimes you're just sort of pitching the concept, the world, the characters. Maybe you'll bring in some visual aids. For me, that sort of visual aid joke was just simply, here's some examples of songs Simon would sing, or here's some examples of songs Maggie would sing, and just kind of being specific about who everybody was and kind of how they interplayed with each other.
But I remember, you know, when Austin came in and pitched it to us, yeah, it was more the concept and a lot about that first episode. And I'll be honest, I actually, because I loved it, but after you left, I remember just saying to the crew, I said, like, I hope this can carry for like a season. But then I just knew you had such a clear vision for it that I was just, I really love when something A, has a great concept, but B, comes from somebody's life. Because I know if this is coming from, you know, from Austin's life with his father, that's going to carry it along. He's going to have these stories that, you know, that we would never kind of predict. And so it makes it very easy then to go, I believe this person can do this. And I'd rather take that flyer. I'm not necessarily the kind of person when somebody pitches something, you're like, pitch me 3 seasons. Cause it's kind of like, you know, when I did Freaks and Geeks, I had a whole Bible. I knew what the whole season was going to be. We threw it out after 2 episodes because the actors were starting to inform us, and the dynamics we were discovering in the writer's room were starting to inform us. And so we were following that trail. And so, you know, if the idea is pure and the talent is real, then, you know, then you let them go and let them do their thing.
That's so cool. Well, thank you for taking a chance on it and doing something different from everything else that's on television, because I think most people are risk adverse and won't take those chances and kind of just stick with the same old procedural that we see over and over again. And I just love the freshness that this show brought.
Thank you, Ashley. This is actually where I have to also give real credit to NBC, because it's so often in the process where you sell something and then they do everything they can to strip away everything fresh and original that they got excited about in the first place. And from minute one, I don't know why. It helps that I knew some of these people, but I don't think it's the only reason why. This has been one where they allowed us to really let it be what it was and didn't overnote and didn't question too much. And through the whole process so far, they've really been great partners. And I could probably count on one hand or on one or two projects where that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, I mean, their enthusiasm for this show has been unwavering. I mean, all the way through now, while we're trying to get attention for it to hopefully, get some awards. They've just been so in, and you don't often get that kind of support from any over company. So thank you to NBC, like Austin said.
So cool. Thank you again.
Thanks.
All right, I want to turn to Michelle Sastramaja. Michelle, let me move you over.
Hi guys. I'm a huge fan of the show. I told my mom about it and she usually hates musical theater, but she actually really loves it. So that says a lot. So I guess I have a question for all of you guys. Kind of, you built such a, that you could see from on the screen, kind of like a community where everyone's excited and the energy is there on the screen. And like, how are you able to, like Paul and Austin, kind of build it with the cast as you cast each one and find all these talents to kind of build this community?
Good question. I mean, I think that, community, I think happens, right? Or you hope it happens. I think some of it comes hopefully from the top down, where there's a philosophy. I have a philosophy. I have a no a-hole policy with people I work with. I just don't have the time or the bandwidth, and especially like work itself is so hard that to work with challenging, difficult people, it's just not what I believe in. And I try to lead hopefully with kindness and heart, and I think hopefully that informs stuff. But on top of that, I think you try to suss that out somewhat when you're casting the people and learning about people as sort of who they are. And then for this project in particular, I just think the work that they're doing, and everybody can speak to this, but certainly all that time in the rehearsal room with Mandy, so much of that time is about trust and creation together. And they can't help but feel bonded and unified when everybody's working towards the same goals. And it is unique than other TV shows where people just check in or check out. Can't really do that on this show. When people aren't shooting, they're in the rehearsal room or the recording studio. And so there's so many levels of trust and so many levels of like, it is almost like camping away on our stages. So I think that's an element of it that helps build the community, is sort of the trust that's formed between the actors and Mandy really in the dance room. And I think that really does help take it to the next level. Also, everyone's in Canada together, and like, people don't really know people in Canada. So I think that's another thing that bonds them is like, we're all we got, man. Like all we have is each other. So I think that's another thing that informs it. But I mean, you guys can speak to it from the bonds that you have with each other.
I mean, it all went down on the pilot for us. I mean, we a fast family forged, and then even in the hiatus, I mean, even though we'd shoot in Canada, we probably hung out equally in between the pilot and the second episode, especially because like we got so busy once we were starting. I mean, especially Jane. I mean, it was just really difficult. She was so busy, so we could really only hang with her on weekends. But I don't know. I mean, just like dance parties at my place in Vancouver, at Alex's place in Vancouver. We're like-minded people, wells of depth and musicality, and everyone likes to dance and have a good time, and they've just become friends and family.
I mean, you can't be a lone wolf on this show or a diva on this show, because you're so dependent on everybody else, and everybody's so vulnerable. Like there's not a person on the show who isn't showing extreme vulnerability in all that they're doing. And so I think that bonds, you become a foxhole pals too.
Yeah, I always say like my favorite thing hands down about being a part of this business and making TV shows and movies is the collaboration. That is the magic of this art. It's a combination of the writing and the acting and the lighting and the cinematography and the props and the set design, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it definitely does start from the top down, and having Austin as our boss. Austin's extremely warm and welcoming, and what I also see in him is he works really, 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 really hard, and he puts his heart into everything he does. And so does Mandy. And so when you're working for people that do that, you don't really have a choice. And then when you look around you and everybody's working at such a high level with so much integrity, you all want to do the same. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'll throw in about Austin, like from the jump, when he's really great at giving speeches, right? He's a great speech maker, and he's very vulnerable. He leads with that. He leads with his vulnerability, and because he does that, it inspires trust in the people that work with him. And I've seen that I saw them in the beginning that we talked before the test. That courage to be vulnerable did something to me before I went into the room. And I've seen him, because I watch people, it's just a thing, whatever, I think we all do. But you get to see people move around the space on a set, and you get to see how they interact with each other. And yes, there's these group moments for sure, but there are also these one-to-one moments that happen spontaneously. And you can't manufacture that. You have to be open to it, and you have to be curious about it. And that's what he leads with, which is great.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing, that there's mutual respect. I feel like Austin understands actors. He respects actors. Paul very, very clearly respects actors and directors. And we respect one another and our process and our work. And I feel very grateful to be a part of this group.
Grateful to have you.
Thanks, guys. It's a nice group. It's a nice group of people. That's all I say.
Okay, so we have a question from Sarah Ortiz, who is also an alum of the Cinema and Media Studies program. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey.
I was not expecting for my question to be chosen. Oh, wow, that's exciting. My question is actually for Paul and Jane. I loved the show, watching it this past season, and I really loved the scene where Jane goes and visits the funeral parlor, I think it's called, and they have this like scene in this musical number. And what I really wanted to ask about it is, what was it like working with each other, and what is it like having fun and like dancing and singing, but mixing it with her father is dying and they're like all these emotions? What is it like mixing those things on set?
Well, let me just say, poor Jane had to act with me. It was not pretty. Bless you, Jane. Bless you.
Well, I mean, Paul and Austin, didn't you guys both dabble in acting yourselves?
Yeah, I more than dabbled, sadly. I was smart enough to get out, but it was a long time ago. So
it was really fun. That episode, Paul, our producer, and Austin, our showrunner, and Mandy, our choreographer, all make cameos, right? It's all the same episode?
Yes.
Is there anyone else I'm missing?
No.
I think the caterer, did he do this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, oh, that was real. Oh, I thought that was
It was always really like, this is becoming a complimentary fest, but I swear it's genuine. It was a big reason why I wanted to be a part of this project was because Paul was involved, and I'm such a big fan of his work, from Freaks and Geeks, Bridesmaids, the list goes on. And so to have him come up to I've worked on shows where we have an executive producer who is as established as Paul, who you never talk to and you never hear from. And I don't really know how that works, but that's not my job to know how it works. But Paul has always been so involved and generous, and to have him come up and act with us was just like a really, really fun treat, and we were all really excited. And then in general, goofing around with John or Skylar is pretty, I mean, being able to act with each other and like watch Skylar improv with me, sometimes it's funny that it's work because it just feels like hanging out with some fun.
One of my favorite joke series is Jane likes to put the crew on camera, so she makes the crew do knock knock jokes on her Instagram. That's a great series. Also, a really other fun, like we have fun on set all the time. I love improving with everybody, and Cap is hilarious. We always try to like get our crap into at Spark Point, who plays Tobin on the show. John Turteltaub has one of the most ham sandwich cameos on this show. I think it's in episode 8. Jane and I are coming out of the elevator, and he directs that episode, and he's just going, like
way too old to be
so blatant, so inappropriate. Why we allowed that to be okay? There's no universe where that man would be at Spark Point.
I'm gonna find that.
Yeah, take a look. I think it's the top of Act 2, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Episode 8.
I'm gonna rewatch
I
it.
think he like smells his coffee or something. He like has coffee. And he's like, or like gives like a weird, very very muggy McMuggerson.
Thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, we've got a question from an incoming MFA student for the production program, Alexander Chang.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I don't think my video's working right now.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so this is like, this is amazing. The show's amazing. I'm actually moving to LA from New York. I'm into this musical theater writing workshop out of BMI in New York City. So this is like exactly the stuff that I really long to see more of in television. So thank you for really being bold in doing this. My question revolves more around, do you see any future for musical shows on television that would use original music? And what do you see as kind of the major roadblocks to that? I know me and my friends have been talking about it, kind of throwing around ideas like because I think the pace of content creation is one of the major roadblocks. And so we were talking about having 3 or 4 songwriting teams and just choosing the best one from that, or just trying to take advantage of being able to tailor a song to the exact moment and the exact character of each of these episodes and all these storylines, and also theoretically saving money over the long run. But yeah, so I was wondering if you had any thoughts or future ideas on that.
I think it's all, I've sold 3 other musical shows before this that had original songs. So I think it's all concept driven. Like Paul was saying, it's like, what is the conceit that gets you into the music? Why are the people singing? How is it motivated? How do the songs advance story? Are the songs happening in reality or fantasy? Is there a high concept conceit behind it? Is it people singing at a karaoke bar? Like what is the language of the show or the language of the musicals that necessitates singing? Or is there no language? Is it High School Musical or something where they just break out into song because that's what they do? So I think it's just all about rules. And when I sell these musical projects, one of the first things I think about is the musical rules and how do the musical rules apply to the project. And so the question of why are they singing is, I think, very vital to it. I think, Paul, you probably agree.
Yeah.
But, so then it's just a question of like, for this one in particular, the conceit was that ZOE gets all the music in the world downloaded into her brain. So the conceit was that it's existing songs. And the conceit was that we're going to use songs that people know as hopefully an access point as well, not a barrier to entry. The challenge with original music is just people don't know it. So sometimes it's like, it's harder for people to tap into it. But then there've been shows like Gallivant is one I can think of off the top of my head, that always use Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. 2 different examples of shows that always used original songs. So, and both of those shows, that songs and the music was built into those conceits.
Yeah, the big danger I'll say is starting with the concept. Because if you look at, even though our show seems very high concept. Where it started from was Austin wanting to tell a story, a true story about his father and what his father went through. So it's all based on characters, based on emotion, it's based on real, real life. And I've been in TV development as has Austin long enough to see high concepts, movies too. Right? I always feel like if you can explain something in one log line that sounds so amazing, that's the most impossible thing to pull off because it's all one conceit and it's just that. It's not about the characters. So it's really, what's the story you want to tell? What is the thing you want to talk about? And who are the characters? Because the characters keep the show alive. This show, with all the great dance numbers and all the cleverness and all that, wouldn't survive at all if it wasn't for these great characters and the great emotion behind it and the fact that it all has a purpose. So I would look at whatever situation you feel most close to that you think you can tell the best, and then figure out how the music can fit into that. But I wouldn't start with the concept first, because I think you're just going to be digging out of a hole.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a current USC comedy student, Brian DeAngelis. Moving you over, Brian.
Hey, comedy school, yay.
Oh my God, I was not expecting to be, I'm like making myself like yogurt and stuff. My name's Brian. Thank you guys for being here. Paul, I'm actually interning at your company. So nice to meet you. I love the show. It's fantastic. You guys are all amazing in it. Something I've been talking to Zach Bianco over at Figco a little bit about is difficulties that you guys had in production, or just roadblocks that you had to overcome in season 1, and then what you anticipate to be a roadblock in season 2, especially with things being the way that they are, and how you guys are planning on dealing with that. And actually also for the cast, John, Jane, and Skylar, how do you deal with feeling comfortable on set, and what are your things that you're keeping in mind, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, it's the big $1 million question, I'll tell you, for all of us trying to get projects back up and going. I mean, Austin, you can talk to the issues you had in the first season, but I know going forward, we're trying to figure everything out from, there's a 2-week quarantine when you go into Canada, and how do you have Bernadette Peters come in and sit in a hotel for 2 weeks to do 2 days, and how do we social distance on the set? What are the rules? Do we quarantine everybody, the entire crew? Do we live in a bubble the whole time? There's a million questions that are all being figured out as we go, and we're in such uncharted territory right now that it changes daily. So we're coming up with protocols, but who knows? We just keep writing and developing them. Nope. Austin, your microphone's off.
Sorry. I got a FaceTime call and it screwed everything up. I don't know how much to add to that beyond it. It's a work in progress. And there are certain shows that are going to go into production before us that will probably reveal certain positives or challenges along the way. Certain shows in Canada that will reveal stuff. None of us are happy about the 14-day quarantine. It really creates real challenges for us, especially in terms of bringing in guest cast and also people's ability to go home and go back and forth. Skylar and I were just talking about this today. It's it's going to be a process, and our hope is that we can still do some version of larger musical numbers in some way. I told Mandy there's a big musical number in Spark Point in episode 1. Mandy and I already talked about it. She seems to think there's a way we can kind of shoot people apart in a way that still makes it feel big. I've looked at a lot of stuff with people already about do we CGI and extras and green screen backgrounds and all kinds of stuff, which feels very good for Lion King or Jungle Book, but I don't know about for our show. So just trying to figure out the rules of it is and so all that I'm really trying to do from a writing perspective right now is lessen the amount of exterior locations, try not to do scenes in big crowded enclosed spaces, and build more sets so that we can have more control over where we're going. And beyond that, that's kind of all I can control at the moment.
You asked what roadblocks we came across in season 1, and for me, the fact that I couldn't clone myself was a challenge, so that I could sleep in. this is a show that takes a lot of choreography, you know, pre-recording for all of us cast, you know. What Mandy pulls off in a week is, and what Austin and her pull off in a week is crazy. And in some ways I feel like it's Uncharted, but then I know that other TV shows have been made in 8 days with musical numbers, but it's a work in process. We're in progress. We're always learning about how to like streamline the process, to organize better, to blah blah blah.
I mean, look, I mean, we just all, it's anxiety. I'm anxiety ridden about it. I mean, it's really insane. I mean, like, because the thing is, we love this show. We're excited. And like, just honestly being on this call and like being on the call I had earlier with Austin, it's just so nice to even be developing, like Paul said. And it's fun to have these creative conversations. We're just living in this world right now. And it's just, we just don't know what that is. And there are so many obstacles, and it's such a miracle that anything gets done and or finished in this world, and like in the TV world on the schedule that we're on. So we'll figure it out. I mean, if we'll do our best, I guess. And if we get the green light, I mean, NBC is not going to let us go if they don't think that they're making every effort. But right now it's in like that Gen 1 stage of, we're going to see what happens over the next few months.
Yeah. But already a million things have changed. I mean, I do a Zoom writers room every day from 10 till 6. And I'm doing Zoom calls in between. I'm on Zooms from 9 till 8 o'clock at night, and like my eyes go blind every day. And trying to get a writer's room to create a rapport and a dynamic. There should be a whole class in how do you do a Zoom writer's room while still figuring out how to make everybody be in sync and be on the same creative page and feel like you're building community there, like someone said earlier. Like, I've spent 3 weeks trying to build community in a Zoom writer's room. It's very hard, much harder than being in the same space and not looking at the same board and not having lunch together and not being able to joke back and forth. Like, there's so many nuances and specific things that happen in writers' rooms that can't be duplicated in a Zoom room. That's just one example.
Mm-hmm. Create a Zoom unity, Zoom community.
Yeah, Zoom unity.
Sorry, there you go. Zoom unity. There you go.
Unity is a Cirque du Soleil already. So that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have time for one more, and I'll call on another alum, Trevor Engelson. And before Trevor comes on, just one really quick question, which is, I was so happy to see Bernadette Peters show up in this show, and I'm curious if you guys are bringing her back, and if there's any other amazing, sort of guest cast that you're thinking about for the next season.
I have a whole Bernadette Peters plan for season 2. Are you filming this, Jane?
I just took a picture, sorry.
I thought you were filming my Bernadette Peters quote. Like, what is he going to say about Bernadette Peters? Yes, I have a whole Bernadette Peters plan. It's really, like Paul said, with Corona and aptitude and like, will she sit in a room for 2 weeks to work for a certain number of days per week? That's just going to be a question mark. And I'm trying to push some of her stuff till later in the season so that hopefully things will open up more and maybe it'll make it more easy to get people like her. Like I told Skylar 7 or 8, like big, good guest stars or recurring guest star possibilities this season. And just our ability to get these people is going to be an open question. One of the things we're going to have to figure out as we go.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How we doing?
Why didn't we do that? Oh, man.
I have a very important question. Very important question. So, Winsberg, you were a big theater kid growing up. You went to a bunch of schools. I think you went to theater camp.
My manager, everybody. This is my manager on the Zoom.
Yeah, this is good.
This is all your missions going there. Awesome.
Skylar, if you put that online, Skylar, I'm gonna come get you.
You put yourself out there, buddy.
What's your question?
So you went to theater school. You went to theater camp, right? What advice do you have for young students coming up that want to have a career like yours? What's the one thing, in short, you could say, what I've really learned, the best thing I could teach you guys is?
First of all, you don't need a manager. That's number one. Advice for being in the business?
Just how to get, because listen, musical theater is such a specific thing, and it only ends up usually on Broadway and once in a while in movies, but it's so rare in television. You know, people that want to eventually do what you're inspiring people to do in television, what advice do you have for somebody who wants to get to your level?
I think the first thing is perseverance. You know, I think that this is such a challenging competitive industry that you have to have a resilience, and you have to have a thick skin, and you have to be able to bounce from project to project. You know, I used to have a thing early. I don't know if this is really answering your question, but early on in my career, a project would get close and then not go, and I would be depressed for 2 months about it. And then learning to have several coals in the fire became important, because then if one goes away, your ability to bounce back becomes quicker each time if you have more things going, or you don't put all your eggs in one basket. But that's hard to do when you care about each project and you're invested. I think you still, as artistic as you want to be, or creatively artistic as you want to be, probably still have to have some kind of commercial instincts behind it. It can't, as we all want to go do our amazing little play in a black box theater with 10 people, but you still have to think about who's the audience or who would want to see this. And I agree with what Paul said too, like, go be personal, but don't be afraid to like find your voice and speak from your heart, and don't always be chasing. Like, I chased a lot of projects, and again, Paul, everybody can speak to this on this panel, but like, I chased a lot of projects and sold projects that I shouldn't have written, that I was probably not the guy to do. Like, I sold a big Martha Stewart show to Fox, and it was me and Martha Stewart and Brian Grazer in the room, and like Martha was going to be in the show. And the thing is, I went to Martha Stewart's Christmas party, and now that I see that you love Martha Stewart, Jane, we'll talk about it later. But like, I didn't really know Martha Stewart, and like, there were probably 100 other writers who could have written the Martha Stewart show better than I could have. So, but I got excited about the project and the team, and I got swept up in the conceit of that. So I think just sort of understanding who you are and trying to be like, I don't think it's an accident that the project that is the most personal to me, that covers all the things that I love, which is musicals and comedy and drama, and taps into all of the things that I've ever wanted to do, is the one that has gotten this kind of reaction. I think that there's something about leaning into the things that you're passionate about and going towards that thing, instead of trying to chase, oh, well, here's a great idea about aliens or whatever. Like, that, if aliens is your passion, then do it. But I'm just saying, like, don't just chase stuff because it could be something that you think you can sell. Really think about who your voice is and what you want to say, and try to develop a thick skin in the process, because it takes a long time.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is to just keep creating, keep writing, keep producing stuff. Because, you know, don't be the person that walks around with the one screenplay for 3 years trying to sell it. I have a lot of people I've known in my past who've done that, and it's usually the thing you don't think it's going to go is the thing to go. That's what Freaks and Geeks was. I'd written up the zillion scripts, all these high concept things I wanted to do, and then kind of out of desperation, in 2 weeks, knocked off this thing about my, you know, being in high school and all my friends. That's the thing that took off. But it's only because I wrote all these other things to get there. And it's only because, you know, Austin did all these things, you know, and we've all done our, what we call parking lot pitches, where, you know, on the way in, like, okay, I need one more idea. All right, they sell cotton candy. Okay, and then you sell Cotton Candy, the show. And then you're like, how the hell do I write Cotton Candy, the show? You know? So just keep writing, keep doing it.
I mean, you're kind of speaking to that Malcolm Gladwell thing too, Paul Feig, which is like the 10,000 hours thing that he talks about, which is like, you know, he says you don't become good at something until you do 10,000 hours of it. I'm getting the quote, I'm butchering the quote, but you know, my 10,000 hours where I've done 10,000 hours on top of 10,000 hours on top of 10,000 hours. And that absolutely informs it all. And that comes from continuing to write. Same thing with acting, right? Like, continuing to practice your craft however you can.
I'm sitting here trying to calculate, is there any way I've done 10,000 hours of acting?
On this one series, you've done the equivalent of 10,000 hours.
Okay. I'm like, am I good yet? Did I do 10,000?
But don't you guys think that don't, I mean, you guys are always constantly working on your craft and looking for projects that mean something to you, and like, you know, find like, why do you get certain parts and not certain things? Isn't it? It's all connected.
I still go to class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, if you can decide you don't want to do this because of a failure, or because of 10 failures, because of 20 failures, you should get out. because only the people that stay in and you're so passionate, there's nothing else you can do, are the ones that eventually get it. Because, you know, so many people will come up to me, oh, you know, my cousin or my nephew wants to get into showbiz, but, you know, he kind of wants, you know, he likes, you know, like you to convince him to do it or something like that. It's like, look, if I have to talk you into this, or even if I can talk you out of it, you shouldn't do it, because as everybody on this screen can say, it's not an easy job.
Yeah, and I think like surrounding yourself with that kind of found family of, you know, of career-wise, those mentors, they might even be your USC professor, or might actually be someone who's not in the business at all, who just believes in you. Could be an actual family member, but that inner strength is really important, to know that it's not personal, but it's impossible to not take it personally, since you should probably write what you know, like Austin said. And so of course it becomes personal, but you know, there's that balance that just doing this, like it helps you prepare for when it actually kind of starts to go right. And then you realize, like in this moment, I could feel a sense in myself, with John, with Jane, with a lot of the cast, that like, you know, we know that there's some great potential here. So we know that we're onto something good, and we want to make it great every day. And we have
you have to have very thick, thin skin, because you have to be very vulnerable, but you have to be tough enough to not let that vulnerability kill you.
Right. And that can evolve over time. That can develop.
Oh yeah.
Something that that hits me is that I try to weave into my life is that it's okay not to know. It's okay not to know. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be curious. Like you may think that a lot of us, we've been doing one thing for a very long time, and it's okay to stretch and leap outside of that and see how that influences what you do. Because sometimes it's an intersection of a lot of different curiosities that make the thing that hits. And so, like Paul, like you were saying, not waiting around with that one thing, or waiting for someone to open the door, but continuing curious and following that curiosity and weaving those new discoveries into what you're building. I think that all's part of it too.
Yeah, keep evolving. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Trevor.
Yes.
You're welcome on our Zoom calls anytime.
Appreciate
it. Jim Cabo.
I mean, you had to pick him as the guy that for the last.
He's funny.
I didn't know. But I'm certainly going to flag him the next time I see a question coming through from him. So that was a great way to end. Thank you all so much for joining us and sharing all of these stories and insights with us. And I can't wait for season 2. So good luck, be safe, and thanks again.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, USC. Thank you, Elizabeth.